The Journey of Enslavement and Liberation, a documentary on Nigerian slave trade and its end. The story of Nigerians' involvement in the transatlantic slave trade is one of immense suffering, resilience, and eventual liberation. The story of Nigerians' involvement in the transatlantic slave trade is one of immense suffering, resilience, and eventual liberation. It is a tale woven into the fabric of history, marked by the point of no return in Badagry, a solemn reminder of humanity's darkest part. This documentary explores the origin of slave trade, the role of colonial powers, the expert route, and the eventual end of this inhuman practice.
You are welcome to the Moby Family Slave Relics. The shackles and chains that I'm holding, the chains that were over 500 years where we are not people, and these original shackles and chains that were used back then on the enslaved Africans. We call it neck collar chain that they wore on the necks of the enslaved Africans. Now, if I'm John's slave, my name should be John. They put inside the fire to write John on my chest or at my back. We call it brandy because the slave kept in the barracoon. What is a barracoon? Barracoon is a Spanish word meaning cell, dungeon, where the enslaved Africans were being kept. We are owned by different owners. For identification, you just have to brand it with red hot iron. Then secondly, there's some slave called fugitives. Who are the fugitives? Those that run away slave. Today you run, tomorrow the master will bring the slave and they put his toe on something the way I'm putting my toe. Now in between the toe, there's a thumb here. Between the thumb and the next finger, they'll fix this in the middle of it. Now at the presence of other slaves, they will hammer it on the toe of the enslaved Africans, or they use an axe or a cutlass. They chop up the toes of the slave Africans so that the slave will not be able to run or not escape. We Africans, we are so smarter, and because those enslaved Africans must communicate, because if they don't communicate, the little freedom that they have today might not be possible. In the cool of the evening, where they live is called quarter or cabin. They now use a tactic known as patting, juba or humble, like they were using that body beating to communicate to each other. Or the women will braid their hair, we call it cornrow, to pass message to each other. Now, this one were used on little children. Now, according to the oral history here in Badagry, we are told that children were given out that extra fisi jara, like you buy like 200 slaves, they give you 2 as a tip. Now, that shows that we sold ourselves into slavery. But I used to tell people there are always 2 sides of coins. Anywhere the Europeans got to, if they realize these people are not well organized, they invaded the place, they forcefully took away the people as a slave. Anywhere they got to, if they see that they have warrior king, they now go through those British ships with items like a bottle of whiskey for 10 human beings as a slave. European will give them the small cannon gun for 100, the longer 100 slaves. They use fabric, horses were also used in a chamber of the slave. And these are some of the money we spent back then in Africa. We go back all this one that were used as the money. We also spent tobacco, Manila, and Yala sorbet. The Europeans said they cannot do business with them with this. That's why they have to use some of the items in exchange of human being. This one is called torturing. As you can see, my hand cannot go through this. If I'm a slave, I must want to punish me. They have to break the boat. Okay. After breaking the boat, they will forcefully force this thing down to the wrist of the enslaved African. Look at this knot. Because these shackles until they are over 500 years, the knot have melted. So they will lose this knot then the slave will be standing on the platform. And then there will be a very tiny hole. They'll fix that, they'll return the knot. The reason why they have to return it so that it will be very well firm. They now will drill the platform where the enslaved Africa was standing. Now, after we done the platform, the slave will be suspended on here with one. Imagine all your weight on this small hand. So, and the slave will be crying in agony. They will let other enslaved Africans stay aside. What they're trying to achieve, they are trying to instill fear into others that if you do this will happen to you. And eventually, If they died, no question, because they were property of their master.
The transatlantic slave trade began in the late 15th century when Portuguese explorers landed on the West African coast. Initially, they sought gold but soon discovered the lucrative potential of human trafficking. By the 16th century, nations like Britain, Spain, France, and the Netherlands transformed West Africa, including Nigeria, into a major source of enslaved labor. Badagry, the point of no return. The slave trade routes in Badagry included sites that haunt our collective memory. The slave market, where enslaved individuals were sold for goods. The slave barracan, holding cells where captives were chained and starved. The point of no return, a narrow pathway leading to the beach, symbolizing the severance from their homeland. One of the most haunting sites is the Antination Well, where enslaved people were forced to drink a concoction said to erase their identities. The role of colonial powers. Colonial powers played a pivotal role in the slave trade, exploiting rivalries among kingdoms. The British established trade relations with coastal elites, exchanging goods for human lives. Major slave ports included Calabar, a bustling port dominated by the Efik people; Lagos, a key port controlled by Yoruba kingdoms; Bonny and Brass, ports in the Niger Delta controlled by the Ijaw people. Resistance and abolition. By the late 18th century, resistance to the slave trade began to grow. Enslaved individuals led revolts and abolitionist movements gained traction across Europe and the Americas. The British abolition of the slave trade in 1807 marked a turning point, though illegal trafficking persisted. The legacy and liberation. The abolition did not immediately end slavery in Nigeria. It took decades for freedom to be fully realized, as the British colonial administration introduced exploitative systems. The story of the slave trade in Nigeria is a stark reminder of humanity's capacity for both cruelty and resilience. As we reflect on this past, we honor the memories of those who suffered and commit to ensuring such atrocities never occur again. This documentary was created to educate and inspire future generations to learn from the past and advocate for justice and equality worldwide.
They always tie their hands at the back this way. Now, they normally mold this in the plantation or in the cabin or quarter where they live. And they'll open the ground, they'll bury it to this level so that it will very stand firm. Now they fetch water into it. So 20 slaves have to surround this. They have to dip their mouth into the water this way like an animal. Another 20 will come. As they were taking the water, it will be reducing. Now, the next 20 to take the water, while they were struggling to take the water, if you put your hand here, this thing is sharp like a blade. So it will cut their belly. Imagine blood, mucus will enter the water. The next 20 to take the water have no choice. You just have to take the water with blood and mucus. If they refuse taking the water, that's the next day, because water and food is only a day job. The man buried here, his name is Chief Sumbo Mobi. Chief Mobi died October 16, 1893. Now, he got to a level, I think 1807, the British have to abolish slavery in their territory. The other countries started to. But Badagry here, this man sat with the British to sign the treaty for the abolition of the trade. That's March 1852. So this is where it was part of the high chief that signed the treaty for the abolition of the trade here in Badagry. And these are local musical instruments called ajogon, mostly used by the Gun people. The women, the royal family used it to entertain themselves, like we call it ajogon. Now, according to the reading, like 10 to 20 women will holding this vertically. They'll bring it up and down, and they'll be singing according to the reading. Now, this is a castrated slave. Why do you have to castrate the men? Most of the men were used as a bodyguard to their master's wife. For them not to have a sexual intercourse with their daughters, they just have to castrate them. Those that survive the castration will also look like a giant. They use them to lift anything that is heavy. Now, like this dog, we call them killer's dog. Any slave that tries to escape, they will set like 20 dogs after them. The dog will devote them to the bowl. Any slave that refuses to accept the master's name or religion will be struck to death. If they die, okay, because they are property of their master. And this is how the slave will be moved from the hinterland to the point of no return or to the slave market. And this is how they used to expel them. Now, taking African across the Atlantic Ocean as a slave to Europe or America, the thing is known as the middle person. Now, this is a separation of family. They resold the husband of the enslaved girl to another merchant, and they're taking him away. He might not have access to see his family till death. And this is a market called Flekete Slave Market, established in 1502. Back then, if you have money, you can go to this market and buy human being the way they used to buy gold in the market. And every market day is 5 days. So imagine 5 days to be selling human being for more than 3 years, or 400 years rather. And according to UNESCO, about 25 to 30 million were being taken away as slaves. It was so sad that only few that made the journey, because the majority of them found themselves at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. Now, this is the slave point of no return, which is across this peninsula. Once you cross this water now, you're still going to walk like 15 to 20 minutes to the beach. After the abolition of the slave trade, 1807 by the British tried to eradicate, that to destroy most of the equipment used back then. But up to date, some family right here in Badagry still house some of the shackles and chains, those relics that were used back then, especially the Mobis family slave relics. Like the chain behind me, the chain is over 500 years, where we are not being born. So that's some part of the traces. Then at the compound of Sediki Williams Abastro, you see the barrack where the slaves were being kept. So those are the footprints that have been left behind. Now, today, most of the school pupils pay a visit. And mostly, if they come to Badagry, what we try to educate them about the slavery, how the slavery happened, so that we won't repeat the same mistake, because those youth, those kids, will be the one that will be in position for tomorrow or even today. So we have to educate them, telling them how the slavery began and how it ends, the role that the British play, the American, even though the African locals, the role they play. We just have to tell the children so that they will know where we are coming from and where we are going. And they also know who they are on the surface of the earth, because there's a lot of hidden truth about Africa. Africa is never a poor continent. Africa don't need to depend on the Westerner. They're supposed to depend on, because we have what it takes. We have the resources, we have everything here in our land. Today in Badagry, we have the route where the enslaved Africans were being dragged in chain to, and at the interval, we see the well of our nation where that they used to give them to drink. Then we also, the market, there's a market in Badagry called Flekete Slave Market. Flekete is god of the wind and the sea. And inside the market, where, where this man was, Richard Landers was tried. We still have the shrine where he was tried when he came to Badagry. And that market back then, established 1502. If you have money, you can still go to that market and buy human being the way they used to buy goats in the market. Then we also have the Seriki Williams Abbas compound, which is we call it Brazilian Barracoon. And Barracoon is a Spanish word meaning cell or dungeon or storehouse where the enslaved African were being kept. I think the room is 9 by 9 size. So imagine keeping 40 human beings in each of those rooms. That's where they would defecate, pee, do a lot of things inside the barrack room. The reason why Badagry was designated as a point of the slavery or as a gateway to enslavement is that because of the, back then, the means of transportation is through water. Then, if you look down, you see that at the other side there's the Atlantic Ocean. Then the what they call the lagoon water that they will cross the enslaved African through. So Badagry serve as because they navigate through the Atlantic Ocean. That's the reason why Badagry was being designated as a point of contact or point of where they would take them down to Europe or America because of because of the water that we have here at the back of the ocean. So Badagry is just a gateway. So you understand. So it's not as if Badagry, they also captured some slaves here in Badagry. But Badagry, most of the slaves taken from our hinterland, Badagry is just a gate, like a port of taking them to the New World, Europe, America, and other parts of the world as a slave.